As we're visiting, there doesn't appear to be a new tropical system headed for the Gulf of Mexico, but there still is plenty of time, so we will see what happens. At this point, the atmosphere is fairly supportive of tropical system development if it occurs. We don't have a whole lot of cross-current jet stream wind patterns going on to slice away the formation of those tropical systems, so that helps things out. So we'll see how things go from here. I think that probably there will be some easing of drought conditions, whether it's enough to, say, pull the southern Illinois out of the Category 4 drought into Category 3 and central Illinois from Category 3 to Category 2. We will see about that. That's one of the features that we're looking for this year, for this fall. If by Thanksgiving we've seen a two-stage improvement in the drought conditions in the Midwest, that tells me that we will have a fighting chance of having some decent conditions going into next planting season. But if by the what amounts to the end of the fall season, if that easing of drought conditions that substantially has not happened, then we know that winter isn't that great a rainfall or precip maker in the first place. So that is a pretty good signal then that we're going to be on the dry side going into spring.
The evaporation and the increased high temperatures also led to the problems that we've had with the drought?
Yes, it has, and that's made things worse because we know that droughts tend to feed on themselves, and when a very warm temperature trend or a very warm breeze blows down onto dry ground, during the daytime that dry ground will heat up even more, and then you have that feedback going into the atmosphere, and so a cycle of drought reinforcing drought and hot temperatures reinforcing hot temperatures gets going. And we've seen that on a sustained basis, obviously, this entire growing season practically, certainly ever since the 1st of June. That's one reason why it's been so difficult to really change things very much, because there hasn't been anything to offer any sort of lower level moisture support for any type of calming down, any type of moderation of this pattern. And once we got that cycle started, it was almost impossible to break.
Do we have, speaking of cycles and weather patterns, will there be an El Nino, and will it impact, if there will it impact weather in the central part of the United States?
I think that we are going to see an El Nino, but at this point it looks like it's going to be a pretty weak event. The features in the Pacific have been really kind of disjointed over the past 3 weeks. I mean, we've seen a couple weeks of fairly solid El Nino indications, and then we've had a couple weeks of, more La Nina type of indications. And so it's almost like the ocean, can't make up its mind as to what it wants to do. Once an El Nino develops, and that's the assessment of the climate bureaus, that El Nino is still going to go on. I think it's going to be a pretty weak event, and it really is not going to last much past, say, the end of December. So there could be some very weak improvement in the jet stream track out of the Pacific into the south-central part of the U.S. With that going on, the likelihood of a sustained period of above normal precipitation in places like the far southern plains, the southeastern Midwest, thinking about Indiana into southeastern Illinois, and then the Gulf Coast, that starts to pull back a little bit. And there's also the high likelihood that from central Illinois on west all the way to Colorado, and then from the Dakotas south into central Texas, that there's going to be a generally dry pattern continue. That's why, as we go forward into the fall season, I'm going to be very interested to see if the fall can bring that two-stage drought category improvement, because if it doesn't, and El Nino indeed just starts to fizzle as we go into the first of the year 2013, then that's where the likelihood of a dry spring really starts kind of asserting itself.
What might we know about wintertime temperatures this time around? Last year was so incredibly mild for Illinois.
As it looks at the moment, I think that we're set for normal to above normal temperatures this winter. There is a feature out in the Atlantic Ocean called the North Atlantic Oscillation that could drive that to a certain extent. If that relationship is negative, there could be some colder air move into the Midwest, and if that happens, I think that would be actually maybe a little bit of an impetus for some winter storms to form and maybe give us some snowfall to work with. But if that feature is on the warm side, I think it's going to be kind of difficult to really bring a whole lot of moisture into the Midwest, and it would also keep temperatures on the warmer side.
So before we start to think about 2013, we probably have to consider your two-stage drought improvement for Central Illinois before you can start to say, what you think might happen in the spring.
Yes, that's what I'm looking at. And right now, in a descriptive term, in southern Illinois, much of that region is in exceptional drought. That's stage 4. So that part of the state, I would like to see improve to severe drought, which is still bad, but it's not as bad. And then in central Illinois, we're seeing extreme drought. Well, I would like to see that improve to moderate drought. And if there would be that type of easing of the drought pattern, it would be substantial, considering the type of very severe drought conditions, historic drought that we've gone through this season.
Would you like to see the easing of the drought conditions too, then, from a pattern standpoint, out west in Colorado or Wyoming or Oklahoma or Texas?
I certainly would. This is this drought is one that has the potential of lasting longer than a year. And we know that there have been times when droughts in the plains tend to exert their influence farther to the east. So, yes, I would like to see a real large-scale improvement in conditions. And if every area could improve to where the exceptional drought category was, say, covering no more than a 0.5 to 1% of the continental U.S., that would be a real piece of work. That would be a truly major accomplishment, I think, as we go through the rest of this year.
Can you put what we went through and what we're going through in historical terms when it comes to drought?
I think we can. The drought that we've had this year has been the worst since the 1950s. It's even worse than the 1988 drought, and I know that the 88 drought just hammered on Illinois to a great extent. But this year's drought covered a larger area than that 1988 drought did, and that's the reason why, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of quite a few other watchers, this drought has been worse than the 1988 drought. It's in the same category as the mid-1950s. Droughts have a tendency to last longer than a year. There have been about 11 of these occurrences since the late 1890s. And in those 11 occurrences, the shortest duration span was around 15 months. That's the least. And then in that, there were two periods where droughts lasted for longer than 4 years running. In the 1930s, 51 months, and in the 1950s, just short of 4 years, 47 months. So this is, an event that is going to resonate, I think, for a long time.
And Bryce, if you talk to a lot of people in Springfield, Central Illinois, other places, they think this drought, and they say this drought really started last fall, last summer, when the rain just kind of turned off midsummer around where we were.
There's that comment. We do know that also that there had been enough moisture that when we got into the springtime, that much of the central part of the country was judged to be drought-free. And so you kind of go back and forth on that. But if we use last summer as a benchmark, then there's the possibility that things could be over with by the end of the year. That's where, again, the drought monitor easing, I think, would be a real key point to keep track of, and we obviously will. But if around June 1st is the starting time frame, then there's the possibility that there's another season of this ahead. So there's a lot of real